morbid to say, but okay, think about this. Okay, you kill me. Just imagine this. Imagine this, it's going somewhere.
Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome back to another episode of True Crime and Wine on our channel. Today we're going to be going over part 2 of Laci's disappearance.
In today's video, we're going to give you the full scoop on what led up to Scott's conviction, evidence that was presented by the prosecution during the trial, evidence that was presented by the defense during the trial, and some evidence that actually didn't make it to the jury.
Now remember, we are doing a 500 subscriber giveaway where we are going to be giving $25 to 2 lucky subscribers.
All you have to do to enter to win $25 is subscribe to our channel, turn on your post notifications, and leave your Cash App handle down below. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified whenever we upload new true crime content on our channel. Now let's get into it.
This video is for entertainment purposes only. All information in this video was found using public sources. We don't mean any disrespect to anyone involved in this case, especially the victims or their families. This video is not made for children. Viewer discretion is advised. So we left off on last video with Amber Frey coming out as Scott's mistress on January 24th of 2002. 4 days later, he would go on to Diane Sawyer on Good Morning America to provide an interview. Now, Diane Sawyer would just question Scott on all of his allegations on where he was, what he was doing, and whether or not he was involved. She would ask him, did you guys fight? Did you guys have a healthy relationship? He was like, yeah, we did. And then she asked the very important question, did she know about Amber Frey? To which Scott said, yes, she did.
Oh yeah, and it was fine. It was okay. They didn't fight about it. Obviously it was a challenging conversation. It was a difficult conversation, but Laci knew, according to Scott, and she, at 8.5 months pregnant, was totally fine with it.
So Diane Sawyer, she was like, you really expect me and the rest of the world to believe that an 8-month pregnant woman is okay with her husband cheating on her? And then Scott said, oh, well, you just don't understand our relationship.
No one knows our relationship but us. And 2 critical things happened beyond that catastrophe during that interview. The first is that Scott slipped up and said that his relationship with Amber is wrong. In present tense, because remember, at this point, guys, Scott is still talking to Amber. Amber came to the media and said, hi, I'm Scott's mistress. I was dating Scott Peterson. And despite that, Scott is still talking to Amber. He's still calling Amber. And during the interview, he commends Amber for the strength to come forward.
And not only that, Diane actually asks if the police knew about Scott's affair. Scott initially said, yes, they did know about the affair. He would end up having a call back the next day to correct himself because later on the police would come on and say, he never told us about that.
He never told us about that. The second important thing that happened that's talked about a lot is that Scott refers to Laci in the past tense, as in Laci was an amazing person. And that is something that, again, we pay attention to as someone who's just watching all of this unfold in the public eye, following the media and investigators as well. Let's remember Chris Watts. He referred to his daughter in the past tense because he had killed her. He knew that she was not alive anymore. And everyone took this when Scott's saying Laci was an amazing person. Okay, this is past tense, and clearly you know that Laci is no longer with us. So this interview was massive. Scott finally broke his silence. And when he did break his silence, he essentially put the final nail into his own coffin. Based upon what happened with that horrible interview with Diane Sawyer, police did decide that at this point, they were no longer looking for missing people. They were looking for bodies. They took to the streets, they took to the forest, and especially they attended to searching the bay where Scott was fishing the day Laci disappeared.
And all the while that the police were doing their own investigations, the families launched their own. So Laci's parents organized huge search efforts that amounted to more than 100 people volunteering to try to find their missing family members. And then at this other side, the Petersons were doing their own thing, trying to publicize the search as much as they could. But while the parents were doing this, Scott was doing something else.
So Scott, Scott continued his relationship with Amber Fry. This is so disappointing. Scott continued his relationship with Amber Fry, even going so far as to celebrate Amber's birthday in secret. And the significance of this is that Amber's birthday directly coincided with Connor's due date.
So instead of grieving, instead of taking time to be with Laci's family, he was out here trying to deliver presents to his mistress.
His mistress.
Now,
He's sneaking in the bushes. He's leaving her candies and chocolates and music. He's trying to serenade his mistress when his unborn son, he's gone. If Laci is alive at this point, Connor has been delivered, and who is he with? Where is he? Well, apparently Scott Peterson didn't care. What was more important was sneaking past the media to deliver a gift to Amber for her birthday.
Now, Amber wasn't with it. Not at all.
No.
As soon as she saw those gifts, she ended up calling Pete or Scott and saying, hey, we probably shouldn't continue this relationship anymore. And Scott was like, you're totally right. I completely agree. Let's not.
Oh, yeah.
Each other
He's
again.
like, I like how you called him Pete, because Sneaky Pete he was. Okay? He's like, you know what, Amber, you're right. You're right. We should stop. This is wrong. He's like, yeah, you're right. No, like he thought of it first. Like, yeah, I know I just left you gifts. I know I just did all that for you. I know I'm like Nora Jones and you to death, but you know what? You're right. Let's stop this relationship because it's wrong. Now, months after your pregnant wife went missing, now let's stop. Now. Okay, Scott.
Let's fast forward to April 12th and 13th. On April 12th, the body of a male fetus was found washed up on the shore near the Berkeley Marina. The next day, on April 13th, the body of a woman, or what was believed to be a woman at the time, washed up as well.
Now, the reason why he said it that way is because most of the parts of this torso, it was primarily just a torso, was so badly decomposed that it was difficult to tell the gender of the person. That's just how it was. That's how the body was found. And so they did have to go to the coroner to find out the gender of the person, and then they could make a determination of if it was who they thought it was, Laci Peterson.
And initially, the coroners didn't believe that they had enough DNA evidence to support that it was Laci Peterson, but eventually that's what they concluded. In terms of the male fetus being Connor, the body was more intact, less decomposed. And there's two theories on why that might have been. One of those theories might support the defense's claim to defend Scott on how he's innocent. The other one might support the prosecution's.
Now we're going to cover what the prosecution presented to the jury as the timeline of events that occurred when Laci Peterson and her unborn son Connor were murdered by Scott Peterson. We're going to be reading off of our computer so that we do not give you guys any misinformation. We want to make sure that we get it right for you.
So on the night of December 23rd, or the morning of December 24th, Scott killed Laci. He would then, in broad daylight, load her body up into his truck, even though he was seen by a neighbor. Then, he would drive to the warehouse, again in broad daylight, load the body of his wife to the boat, hook up the boat, drive to the Berkeley Marina, place the boat into the water, drive off, and then dump the body. And then he would drive back, calling her on the cell phone, leaving a voicemail, acting as if everything was normal until he reported her missing.
Now, the prosecution pointed out a few things in Scott's story that just weren't consistent with some of the circumstantial evidence that they found. The first being that the morning that Laci allegedly disappeared, according to Scott. Now, if you didn't see part one, you should definitely watch part one because we went through the entire timeline of the disappearance in detail. But one thing that Scott mentioned to investigators is that he heard Martha Stewart, which was Laci's favorite TV show, playing on the television, and she mentioned something about meringue. According to the prosecution, Martha Stewart didn't mention meringue in the episode that was aired on the morning of December 24th.
Then, the prosecution found a piece of hair on pliers that was found in Scott's boat. Now, that would just support the evidence that Scott somehow killed his wife, put him on the boat, and then just dumped her.
Now, according to the prosecution, no one knew about Scott's boat. Scott purchased the boat around December 9th, and Laci wasn't aware of the fact, according to the prosecution, that he had this boat. Laci's friends and family, and I believe even Scott's family, reported that they weren't aware of the fact that Scott even owned this new boat. So, why would Laci's hair be on the boat that she knew nothing about? That's something that the prosecution brought to the attention of the jury.
Something else the prosecution brought up was the fact that when Laci's body was recovered from the bay, she was wearing tan pants. Now, when they interviewed Amy, her half-sister, the night before when they went to her salon, Amy testified that she was wearing tan pants. So they, being the police and the prosecution, thought that she was wearing the same exact clothes that she was seen in the day before.
And the adult torso that was confirmed to be Laci Peterson had on a pair of tan or beige pants. So if what Scott said was that Laci went to bed with him that night and disappeared the next morning, why would she be found in the same clothes? And that was, again, another piece of evidence that they said, okay, Scott's story is not making sense.
After the body of Laci was discovered, or during that time that she was missing, Scott engaged in a few peculiar activities. For example, he sold Laci's car to trade it up for a new truck. He also attempted to sell the house. And he tried to take out $250,000 of her life insurance policy before it was made for sure that Laci was dead.
To go retrieve the life insurance for your missing wife, who's missing and pregnant with your unborn son, your first child, Connor, is just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, on top of that, there was more evidence, such as demeanor evidence, and I keep using that term, and I will try to put a definition on the screen. Demeanor evidence. How are you behaving when all of this is going on? And Scott was cool as a cucumber. He was not showing any emotion. This man didn't shed a tear. This man was void. He didn't seem to care that his wife was missing. His pregnant wife was missing. And he wasn't frantic. He was completely fine. And what's more is that in the hours and hours and hours of footage that they recorded between Scott Peterson and Amber Frey, he was jovial. He was joking around. He was just, oh, I'm so in love with you, sweetie. I mean, he didn't say that. In his defense, he never said he was in love with Amber.
Sure.
But he strongly implied his feelings for her. He called her sweetie a lot, which is the same thing he called Laci on the voicemail he left driving back from the bay on December 24th. But I digress. He didn't behave as though anything was wrong at all. He just, and never mind all the shady stuff he was doing with changing the cars and creeping on the police and then hiding in bushes. I mean, there was a lot to make Scott seem guilty.
And not to mention every single time that Scott was referring to Laci, whether it was in interviews or his taped recordings with Amber, he was always referring her in the past tense. Why would you automatically just jump into referring to your missing significant other in the past tense if you knew that she wasn't around anymore?
I mean, even when I've lost a friend, sometimes I still refer to her in present tense, as in she is. And it's been well over a year. So it's why he would immediately switch to, oh, Laci was, is very strange. It's really, really strange. And then I think one of the more talked about, I guess now than maybe at the time, was Scott did, how do I say this in a nice PG way? Scott subscribed to adult channels. Yes, Laci, allegedly, obviously we do not know Laci, but from what we've read online, she was a pretty conservative woman and she was not accepting or condoning of such adult content. Why Scott decided to subscribe to not just one, but multiple adult channels. Why are you thinking about that when your pregnant wife is missing? Why are you doing that? Is that the first thing you're thinking about as you're on the phone with Amber? Is that you're just watching your adult content on TV? Really?
And then not only that, but then when police were going to go over to his house to investigate, before they did, he unsubscribed. And the reason for unsubscribing was he was going to be moving out of the country.
That's what he told the company. He said, "Hi, I'm moving out the country, so I need to unsubscribe from my adult content now." Okay, Scott. With all of that being said, that is just some of the evidence that led to Scott being convicted. First-degree murder for Laci, second-degree murder for Connor, and ultimately he was sentenced to death for his involvement in their deaths. So why, with all of this, I mean, he looks shady. He's sus. Why are we here talking about it in 2021 that he could be let out? He could go free. His death sentence was already overturned. So why is that? What's the other evidence? Let's get into that now.
Now we're going to start discussing what the defense shared with the jurors,
As well as the evidence that actually didn't make it to the trial, because all of it's relevant in the question of now, does Scott need a new trial? Was it a fair trial? And is this evidence important to consider? So we're going to present all the evidence that we're aware of with you guys right now.
So let's start all the way back at the house. The prosecution said that there was no mention of meringue on the episode of Martha Stewart that Scott told police he saw that morning. Now, it was actually later on found out to have been a rerun that did mention lemon meringue or just meringue and cookies at around like 9:48 a.m.
If that's the case, then there is a chance that Laci was watching Martha Stewart that morning. So the timeline of the prosecution would be thrown off right then and there, because she was still alive the morning of December 24th, like Scott said.
And again, that was Laci's favorite TV show. So why would Scott, if Laci wasn't alive or around, be watching Martha Stewart?
Is that something you would think about? I mean, this is morbid to say, but okay, think about this. Okay, you kill me. Just imagine this. Imagine this, it's going somewhere. You kill me, and you have my body that must be disposed of. Do you think to yourself, better turn on her favorite show for evidence, like so that I can... Would you think about that? I don't know. I don't know if Scott's smart enough to think about that. It's like...
But then again, this man was the same guy who, when he couldn't get a contractor to install a vent into his restaurant, went to Los Angeles and completed the course himself and installed the vent himself. So potentially, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. This is just something that, again, the jury was told there was no mention of meringue, but there was a mention of meringue that morning. Let's move on.
Police would end up finding the tan pants that Amy, Laci's half-sister, claimed to have seen Laci in the night before. They were accounted for in the house. So this would suggest that Laci was actually at the house, took off her clothes, put on different clothes, and was potentially still alive. Because who's to say that someone doesn't have multiple pairs of the same colored pants? For example, I have like 5 different black sweatpants in my closet, and she has like 20 black yoga pants.
All of this wine is almost gone. I don't know if you guys are watching this, but all this wine is almost gone. To that though, that when I come home, I do strip out of whatever clothes I was wearing outside, and then I'll change to something more comfortable. And considering that she was pregnant, she might have done that too, because, you know, they watched. Okay. They watched football that night. I don't know how comfortable those pants were that she was wearing. Maybe she changed it to something different. But if any of those things happened, then the prosecution's argument that she would have died wearing the same clothing that Amy saw her in was not supported. It couldn't be the case. Scott mentioned that Laci wore blue pajama pants to bed. And those same pajama pants, he said he woke up that morning, and this is in his, initial conversation with investigators. He woke up that morning and he said he noticed that Laci had thrown the blue pajama pants she wore to bed over the hamper. And when they did search the house, they found those blue pajama pants exactly where Scott said that they were. Now, is it possible that Scott placed them there? Yes. But there's also a chance that maybe this is more evidence that's supporting Scott's claim. Moving on into the kitchen. Watch part 1 because this is all based upon Scott's account we discussed in part 1. According to Scott, Laci was talking to him the morning of the 24th with Martha Stewart on in the background. She was talking to him about a breakfast that she wanted to make, some fancy French toast, and the recipe for that was found on the counter by authorities when they searched the home. Do you want to talk about the bathroom?
Now, in the bathroom, if you remember in part 1, go watch part 1 to jog your memory. Laci went over to the salon
the night before,
which is where Amy's half-sister was, and she was taught how to curl her hair, at the ends, like
I explained it. It's basically she wanted to just flip it up at the ends. Laci was trying to do that. According to Scott, the morning of the 24th, she went to the bathroom to work on that.
2 things to know. There was actually a recording between Scott and Laci's mother where Scott was commenting on how cute Laci looked at attempting to do her hair the way Amy taught her the day before.
Mm-hmm.
Second, when investigators showed up to the house, there was a bench in the bathroom and the curling iron was still connected into the outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they had a housekeeper. Her name was Margarita Nava, and the night before, on the 23rd, she being the housekeeper, was there doing what she does, and she noticed that in the bathroom there wasn't anything there. There was no bench, and there was no curling iron. So why would police the next day find a bench and a curling iron still connected? At what point did Laci curl her hair? The night before? After?
No, this makes sense.
None of that makes sense, right? Because, I don't curl my hair, so...
I do. And, you're not going to want to sleep on your fresh curls, your fresh blowout, you know what I mean? But, again, Scott could have staged the whole thing. But the fact that that wasn't really emphasized, I think, is strange. Because, okay, again, if you were to, off me, would you go set up a whole thing in the bathroom? Would you put the bench for me to sit down and, is that something when you've murdered someone that you think to do? I don't know, because I don't do that. But this is, again, maybe there is a chance that this could support Scott. It's hard for me to get the words out. This could support Scott, and that's something to consider.
Let's move away from the bathroom and go to their home computer. On the home computer, there was history searches for a red banded scarf and an umbrella stand. That would have been searched at around late 8 a.m., early 9 a.m. Why would Scott be searching for a red banded scarf and an umbrella stand? Unless he was looking, for late Christmas shopping, but that's the 24th, so that's pretty late.
So I read something that said that something about sunflowers, I believe, was searched, and that was Laci's favorite. So would Scott, again, be on the computer? His dead pregnant wife's body is in the house. Would you be, again, this is a lot of setting up. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of staging that we've mentioned to provide records on the computer, to set up the bathroom, to set up the pajama pants. And again, there's no DNA evidence in this house suggesting any sort of foul play occurred within the home. That is a lot to do. No DNA. We have to stage 4 rooms and dispose of the body without being caught in broad daylight?
Not to mention that the defense actually asked the police to have conducted a thorough search history on what Laci might have actually looked up on the computer, but they refused to do it.
Why? Why refuse to do it? And I have issues with a lot of the different aspects of the investigation in this case. And again, I'm not saying that Scott is innocent. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that at times I do question those things. These are things that have to be considered. Was Scott Peterson calculated enough to have staged this elaborate setup? Was he capable of doing that? potentially, but it's the potentially. There's something about it that gives me pause.
It leaves room for doubt.
And we're going to get to it. Let's move on to outside the home after Scott claims to have left. And we're going to give you guys a few different accounts of things that happened between Scott's warehouse, outside the Peterson home, and then across the street.
Scott is now on the way to the warehouse. Now, eyewitnesses actually testified that 2 to 3 days before the disappearance of Laci Peterson, they saw a very pregnant woman with Scott at the pod. Now, this would disprove the prosecution's claim that no one knew about the boat, because I don't know if Scott knew any other pregnant woman, but it would probably be Laci that was with him at the warehouse.
Also, Scott paid for the boat in early December, and when you look at their bank account statements, he actually withdrew the $1,400 for the boat from the account that he shared with Laci. So there is the possibility that Laci knew about the boat just because of the bank statements. If we don't share bank account, but if he made a big purchase of $1,400, I would ask where the money went. Like, what was it for that you needed $1,400? And yes, again, Scott could have lied and not mentioned the boat. But Scott could have also said, hi, I bought a little boat, and this was a little boat. Like, there is a possibility that Laci knew about it. But two important things then. One, Laci knew about the boat. Laci was aware of it, so it wasn't a secret. And they kept emphasizing this as a point of Scott's deceptive nature, which Scott is plenty deceptive. But maybe in that moment, Laci did know about the boat. Secondly, if Laci knew about the boat, and Laci was there at the warehouse / pod, then that would explain the hair that was found on the boat, because that is the only piece of DNA evidence that was presented in court to the jury. So if we're explaining that through her having been there just a couple of days before, and never mind the fact that it could have just fallen off of Scott's shirt, because I shed like a dog. Like, you walk around with hairs of mine on you all the time.
Yeah.
So one hair. If we put her there in the warehouse, then that evidence is essentially just gone. Because what evidence is that?
Let's go back to the Peterson house. At the Peterson house, there were many eyewitnesses that came forward that gave tips off to police that they saw a very pregnant woman walking a dog. Now, police didn't follow up on these tips because they just had this tunnel vision that they believed that it was Scott. But if so many eyewitnesses came out and said that they saw a pregnant woman walking a dog,
golden retriever at that, a golden retriever wearing the same clothing that Scott stated that Laci was wearing the morning she disappeared,
then that would prove that Laci was still alive and Scott had nothing to do with it.
One of the neighbors of the Petersons saw Mackenzie, their golden retriever, wandering around the neighborhood with her leash still on, and she knew that it was the Petersons' dog, and she put the dog in the backyard. Now, according to that neighbor, it happened pretty early on, like around 10:18 or so. I could have the time incorrect. Don't quote me on that. But whatever time she said it was, this is important, because that is something that the prosecution used in their timeline of events. Now, by 10:18, Scott is already he's gone. You know, he's out here. I think he's sending emails at this point.
He's already at the
all
marina.
Sorts of things. Like, he's not at the marina, but he's on his way. He's already, hit the warehouse, all those things. However, the mailman delivered mail to the Peterson home around that same time. And there are actual, apparently when you deliver mail, it does scan and it gives you timestamps of when the mail was delivered. The dog was not there. And he knew that because the dog would always be in the backyard barking at the mailman. So clearly, there is the possibility that the witness had the time wrong as to when she put Mackenzie in the backyard, because we know from the mailman's account, which he has proof of his timeline, that the dog wasn't yet there. So that again, it throws in a little bit of doubt into the prosecution's timeline of events, because Laci then could still be, hypothetically, walking Mackenzie, and Scott is long gone.
Now let's focus a little bit on like the police investigation. They pulled out all the stops basically. So they came out with police dogs. Now these police dogs, one, went into the middle of the street following Laci's scent. Now this would suggest that Laci actually didn't return home and that she was picked up by a car. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but they also tracked down Laci's scent to the marina where Scott would later be said to have been fishing. Now the thing with that is these police dogs failed about 2/3 of their certification exams. How reliable were they really?
And also, and I read this in a couple of places, the item of Laci's that they gave the dog to track the scent also had Scott's scent on it. So, were they picking up Laci or were they picking up Scott? Because there's no way for us to say to the dog, which one are you picking up? They can't say that. So, the dog could alert, correctly or incorrectly, to a scent that was on whatever item they gave the dog, but alerting to Scott, whose scent was on the item. So we're not certain with that. Never mind the fact that, again, yes, like you said, the dogs failed their certification exam, and we're wrong, over 60% of the time.
Now we mentioned that the dogs tracked the scent of Laci to the marina. Now, this is where Scott was boating with his small freshwater boat.
On the saltwater marina.
Now, the defense actually conducted a little experiment where they put a boat of similar dimensions onto the water, but also tried to dump a 100-pound body out of the boat. And they found that every time that they did, the boat tipped.
Every time.
Every time. But when given the chance to actually conduct the experiment with the prosecution present, the defense didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't they do that? That might have actually helped them in the case to prove that Scott was innocent.
Well, I could see why you wouldn't do that, just as someone who's had to run experiments before. You don't want to risk that one time the boat doesn't tip. Can you imagine? And when we were talking about this, I compared it to OJ trying on the glove in the middle of the courtroom. That theatrics, like, oh, look, if he puts the glove on and it fits, he did it. And it didn't fit. And then there was all that embarrassment. And to this day, part of our language is a part of how we communicate about things. Everyone knows about OJ's glove. So do you want it to be Scott's boat? I wouldn't take that chance.
And then again, Mark Garagos is a really famous lawyer. So he wouldn't want to be proven wrong and then that just stick with him.
Do you want to be that guy? Would you want to be that guy? I wouldn't want to be that guy. No, you don't want to be that guy. Also, let's talk a little bit more about the witnesses that the prosecution brought forth. Now, they brought forth a water specialist. And this water specialist said a bunch of words that, to be honest, I didn't pay any attention to beyond water bubbles, because he's not even a doctor. This guy that they put on the stand to tell the jury about all these water bubbles, and if I was on the jury, I probably would have just zoned right out, because even reading it, I can't tell you what the man said. But none of that's really important, is it? Because the man is just a random man who didn't go to school to be a water doctor. Why wasn't that mentioned? You want us to listen to this man drone on and on about water and bubbles and patterns in water, and he's not even a doctor. Maybe the wine hit.
I think the wine hit, guys. Now that we're talking about the witnesses, let's turn it around a little bit and talk about the jurors. Now, the jurors that were involved in the case for Scott's conviction and sentencing, it sounded like just a whole mess. Because there were jurors coming in, jurors getting kicked out, new jurors coming in, then later on down the line and a few years later that these jurors shouldn't have been on. It was just a whole mess. So basically, let's break it down a little bit. First, when it came to actual juror selection, they were dismissing any jurors that didn't want to consider the death penalty. Now, why were they doing that?
Well, okay. When you become a juror, I haven't had jury duty yet, but I've paid attention to this because I'm really into true crime. So apparently you have to fill out a questionnaire. And in the questionnaire, they ask you a bunch of questions relevant to the case. And for this case, they specifically asked any potential jurors, are you against the death penalty? Or something along those lines. And any juror who said yes, or any juror who reported that they wouldn't want to convict anyone and sentence them to death, was immediately dismissed. This is definitely a pro-prosecution movement in the juror selection process. Because obviously the defense would want someone there who didn't want the death penalty, who wasn't in support of the death penalty, but they didn't even consider allowing anyone on the jury who was against the death penalty or said that they wouldn't feel comfortable sentencing someone to death. However they asked the question, they were dismissed. And this was a lot of people that they were just weeding through for jury selection. And considering how sensationalized this case was, it was difficult enough to try to find jurors who weren't as biased, which we'll get to in a minute. And so for you to then take that and say like, oh, maybe they're not as biased, but they're against the death penalty, so they were dismissed. And that's crazy to me. How did that happen?
When it came to the application or the questionnaire that you would take as a juror to become part of the jury in the case, it was found that a lot of people just lied.
Right.
They were lying because they wanted to make sure that they sentenced Scott to jail and he got what he deserved. Because in their minds,
Allegedly.
Because in their minds, he was already guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the jurors that lied, she might not have done the lie to convict him, but she still did lie, was Strawberry Shortcake.
I think she lied on purpose. I'm going to come out and say it. I think Strawberry Shortcake lied on purpose, and we're not going to say her legal name because
we're not trying to get sued.
But Strawberry Shortcake was a juror who had flaming red hair. She wrote a book about her experience during the trial and all this stuff. But she's recently come into question quite a bit in the media, and is a part of the reason why Scott's death sentence was overturned. What did Strawberry Shortcake do? She committed
prejudicial misconduct,
which is a fancy way of saying she lied a lot.
Basically what happened was the questionnaire asked if she was involved in any legal proceedings that were similar to the case. She had said no. But in actuality, 4 years earlier, she filed a restraining order out on her baby daddy's ex-girlfriend because she, quote unquote, feared for the life of her newborn child.
Unborn child. She feared for the life. She was pregnant at the time. And her baby daddy had this ex-girlfriend that she said was threatening her. Now, she's since come out and said, like, oh, she never threatened the baby, blah, 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 blah. But on the paperwork for this restraining order, it's written that she feared for the life of her unborn child. And this case is involving a pregnant woman, the death of a pregnant woman and her unborn child. If she had answered correctly, Strawberry Shortcake would have not been admitted onto the jury. She would have been dismissed. And it's possible that she knew that because allegedly, according to the other jurors, she was a little fixated on baby Connor, Laci and Scott's unborn son. She was a little too into and a little too concerned, as in more concerned than everyone else, with Connor, with his development, with his body when it was found. She was just a little bit more interested and a little bit more bothered by that fact. And maybe her own bias from her own experiences was a part of why she behaved that way. It made her attend to those details a little bit more. And considering, like, if you think about it, Scott, like everyone else, deserved a fair trial. And this just wasn't fair. Like, for her to have such a bias and for her to lie about it, now we know why his sentence was overturned.
So if Scott didn't do it, who could have done it? Well, we're going to present two theories right now. First theory is that it might have actually been the burglars that robbed their front door neighbor's house on the 26th. Now, they come into question because one of the burglars that were questioned by the police, well, as soon as he got arrested, the first thing to come out of his mouth was, "We had nothing to do with that pregnant woman."
Which is so strange. Why is it the first thing that you say? Not, "Why are you here? Why are you arresting me?" You know, no feigning innocence, just, "Oh, didn't have anything to do with the pregnant girl."
And when he was questioned, his timelines didn't match up. Because first he ended up saying that he robbed the house on the 27th. But the Medinas, who were the Petersons' front door's neighbors, actually came back on the 26th. So there was no way he could have done that. So then he said, "Oh, you're right. It was actually the morning of the 26th that I did that." But that couldn't have happened either because there were already media and news reporters outside of the Petersons' house.
24/7. I mean, they didn't move. And the Medinas themselves, who owned the home, said, "Hey, we were burglarized on December 24th, which was the same day that Laci went missing."
Also, when he was recounting, he being the burglar, when he was recounting the events of the burglary, he said that he got into the house, took out the safe, and put it in the front lawn. That would have been suspicious, and I'm pretty sure a news reporter would have noticed that. So the man said he wanted to go get his getaway driver. Now, when they came back, what could have happened was Laci, while walking the dog, saw that they were robbing her front door neighbor's house. In a panic, they could have snatched Laci, thrown her into the van, and then left.
And this was a big van. This is one of those shady, you know, the van, the big van, that like sliding door van, one of those vans. So it's possible, it's a theory, that they could have grabbed little 5'1" Laci and thrown her in the van. We're not saying that's what happened. We're just saying that's another theory that could be considered.
Theory number 2. Laci's disappearance might have actually been tied to another disappearance that happened earlier in 2002. That being the disappearance of Evelyn Hernandez. Now, who was Evelyn Hernandez?
Evelyn Hernandez was another pregnant woman who went missing several months before Laci. Now, the details of their case are eerily similar, and if you look into her disappearance, you'll see that her remains were found in very similar conditions to that of Laci. It's really odd, and that is something that, just even for me researching, I thought about, like, these two cases could be connected. And also, Mark Garagos, Scott's defense attorney, made an argument during the trial that their disappearances were connected through satanic cults.
Now, the reason why he brought this up was because of the dates of their disappearance. Now, Evelyn Hernandez disappeared on May 1st of 2002, while Laci Peterson disappeared on December 24th. Now, these dates are significant because those are both holidays of satanic culture. Now, what do they do during those holidays? We don't know. We didn't research that. We're not cult experts. But we do know that one of the purest things that they could have done was sacrifice a baby. Well, that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for staying with us in our True Crime and Wine, and we hope you guys enjoyed.
See you guys next time for another drink. Oh, and be sure to enter our 500 subscriber giveaway. Subscribe to our channel, turn on that post notification bell, and comment your Cash App handle down below so you can be eligible to win. Thanks again, guys. Bye.